So this is going to be a big spoiler discussion for the final season of Samurai Jack. I want to say this straight up because I really have no idea how I can possibly talk about this beast without spoiling it, because there is a lot to talk about, a lot of thematic stuff, and a lot of stuff that hinges upon me just going into like the big overall story details that I can't do if I'm just going to non-spoiler it. So if you're someone who has seen the final season of Samurai Jack in its entirety and you don't care about spoilers, obviously, then welcome. Feel free to listen. If you're someone who doesn't care about spoilers and you haven't seen the season anyway, you're welcome. But if you're someone who hasn't seen anything of the final season, or you're someone who hasn't seen the final episode, please leave now, because I don't want to hear stupid bitching and moaning about, oh, you spoiled things for me. No, motherfucker, I gave you a fair warning. And with that out of the way, let's get down into the nitty gritty. So the final season of Samurai Jack finally completed yesterday, and that is kind of amazing to think about, because Samurai Jack was one of those things that was, kind of really popular from my childhood, and I never thought it was going to be completed, because Genndy Tartakovsky tried to get it, revive it, and conclude it in various different ways. It was going to be a CGI movie by Sony. That's one of the reasons why Genndy Tartakovsky even worked on Hotel Transylvania films. He was trying to build his credibility in Hollywood up so that he could eventually make a Samurai Jack film. But a couple of years ago, Adult Swim announced that they were going to make a season, that they were going to give him 10 episodes to conclude the franchise. And no matter what I'm about to say about the overall quality of the season for the final, run of Samurai Jack, I appreciate the fact that Genndy Tartakovsky stuck to his guns. He made this as a final season, not like a revival in the vein of Dragon Ball and Star Wars, where they bring a franchise or series back just so that they can keep milking the shit out of it for an indeterminate amount of time before people finally get sick of it, or before the sales finally plummet to the point where it can go the fuck away and properly die already. So no matter what I'm about to say about the quality of the final season, I appreciate the fact that Genndy Tartakovsky did definitively end things. But the problem is, the way he chose to end it is kind of a mess. And one of my big fears for this season, besides the rating, was the fact that Genndy Tartakovsky was not a good planner, that he and his crew were not the people you get to plan out a big overall story spread across 10 whole episodes. Now, they've done multiple parters, like 2 or 3 parters, fairly well. And they've done episodic storylines very well, but this season proved my fear was correct, that these guys are not really equipped to handle like a big overall storyline, because there are a lot of contrivances that happen in this season. There are a lot of developments that seem to matter, but then they don't, and then they keep coming back. And then there's just some weird like pacing and structural decisions where we're like getting to the end of the season, and it doesn't feel like that. It just feels like we're going back into standard McDefault Samurai Jack territory, where we're just like telling episodic tales that don't really matter in like the bigger picture. And by the end, it still feels like we're missing a couple episodes. Like the ending for this feels so half-assed, so underwritten, that I'm shocked that they made it the way they did. It feels like there's at least like a couple more episodes missing somewhere to properly conclude things. So even though they did end it, I really can't say that they ended it well. And the ending kind of fucks with everything. And the ending isn't like one of those things where it's like amazing for like 99% of it, and then the ending kind of like breaks everything. But like I said, there are problems that are spread across the overall season that are indicative of the overall issue of these people did not know how to write a big story across 10 episodes, and that's really, really obvious. But let's just get to the ending, because the ending is the thing that I kind of most want to talk about, and then I'll come back to the rest of the season. The ending, I don't know what the fuck to make of the ending, because I don't know if the time travel rules are like Terminator 2 or if they're like Dragon Ball, but no matter which way you slice it, they kind of don't make any sense whatsoever. Because in Terminator 2, the whole thing about the film is to stop the creation of Skynet. And the Terminator himself, as played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, is instrumental in killing Miles Dyson and destroying all traces of Skynet. But here's the problem. For the Terminator to exist, to set the various events up for Skynet to be destroyed, the apocalyptic future that's birthed from the creation of Skynet has to exist in the first place to send the Terminator back in time so that he can prevent the creation of Skynet. Like, you see where I'm going with this. I don't know if that's how it's supposed to be, where Jack killing Aku in the past is supposed to prevent the apocalyptic future, but if Aku is dead in the future, then where are the various circumstances that give Jack the ability to go back at all into the past from? Certainly Ashi shouldn't exist, so I don't know if it's like that, or if it's like a Dragon Ball thing where Ashi and Jack going back into the past creates such a paradox that the timeline splits. So you have one timeline that goes with the apocalyptic Aku future, and then you have a new timeline where everything is peaceful, everything is okay. If it's supposed to be like Dragon Ball, then that's kind of fucked up, because you still have one version of history where Aku is in control in the future, but without Jack and without the sword, Jack has pretty much kind of doomed all of his friends into being fucked by Aku, who's still alive in this original timeline. So the ending is fucked no matter which way you go with it, and I don't even know what they're trying to do. The ending is so vague, so underwritten. In fact, the entire final episode feels really underwritten, to the point where I feel like entire chunks of the episode have been just cut out. And it feels like there was at least one or two more episodes left that were trying to maybe expand on this whole idea, but they don't exist. We just have what we have, and what we have is just kind of half-assed and confusing, and just reaffirms my assertion that fucking time travel should not be used in storylines. It never works. It never, ever, ever, ever works. And this definitely solidifies my hatred for the whole time travel as a story device concept. And my biggest problem with the ending is not that it doesn't make sense, although that is kind of a big part of it. It's that the ending kind of fucks with the whole theme that runs throughout the entire season. One of the things that the crew manages to keep fairly consistent throughout the entire season is this idea of accepting that you failed the past, but that the future is worth saving. Because Jack's whole mantra throughout most of the series is go back to the past to prevent the future that is Aku. And that implies that whatever Jack does in the future doesn't really matter, because he's going to go back to the past and he's going to kill Aku, and if Aku isn't there, obviously all of this apocalyptic stuff can't happen. And so Jack, throughout most of the other seasons, he's trying to find a time portal, but the premise of this season was that Jack has lost the ability to go back in time. He cannot do it, and he has to accept the fact that he cannot go back in time. He will never see his family again. All the people who have died and suffered under Aku's rule for the past centuries cannot be saved. But just because he's failed the past, just because he can't prevent all that suffering in retrospect, doesn't mean that he cannot still kill Aku right now and save the future and create a better world for the generations that come from this point in time. And a lot of the season is talking about that, about Jack accepting the fact that he has failed this part of his mission, but just because he's failed a part of it doesn't mean that the overall mission still isn't attainable, that he can't still beat Aku, that he can't still bring justice to the world, that he can't still save it. And they fuck with it with the ending by basically sending Jack back into the past. And so a lot of Jack's, conflict throughout the season that's all about enforcing that theme, that idea, just means fucking nothing by the end of it. And even though they keep the theme consistent, Jack's mental state is really inconsistent, because you have a lot of times where Jack feels very normal and then he feels very psychotic. And the problem is that there's no real progression. Some episodes, Jack's just kind of manic and insane, and then other episodes, he's perfectly calm, he's perfectly cool, and it just feels really off. You don't really, you get a good sense for Jack's mental state in the first 2 or 3 episodes, and then afterward they get really inconsistent with that, where Jack is, like I already said, sometimes he's perfectly normal, sometimes he's perfectly fine, and then other episodes he's just kind of fucking broken and they don't make sense. Like there's an episode after Jack gets his sword back, after he gets himself cleaned up, after he should, for all intents and purposes, be fixed. There are still scenes after that where he's like talking to himself and he has like this weird other version of himself talking to him. So like Jack's mental state doesn't really make sense, and I guess maybe that's supposed to be the point where even if Jack gets fixed, he's always going to be broken from his experiences. But like I said, it feels so inconsistent that I can't tell if it's supposed to be a theme or if it's supposed to be just bad writing and bad planning. And the bad planning overall is very evident in the fact that there are quite a few contrivances just to make things happen in this season. For one, how the hell does Aku not know that Jack didn't lose his sword? Because between the ending of the final episode from like the earlier seasons and this one, there's 50 years. And we see that Jack lost his sword at some indeterminate point in time. And we also know that Aku is spying on him because in his own therapy session, Aku says that Jack has grown out his beard. He's just a wandering psychopath. He's just crazy. And when I watch that and I think to myself, how the fuck do you not know that Jack lost his sword? Because it's not like Aku destroyed the last time portal and then a few years or a few decades after that, Jack lost his sword then at a point where Aku probably wasn't paying attention to him as much anymore. Jack loses his sword immediately after the time portal is destroyed. And so you're really going to tell me that Aku wouldn't watch Jack for like days on end, that he wouldn't like, savor his opponent's, misery at the fact that he can never go back into the past? Like, you're really going to tell me that he wouldn't do that? And so I just don't buy the fact that Aku wouldn't know Jack lost his sword. It just does not make any sense to me. Another big contrivance is kind of his relationship with Ashi. And I'm not opposed to Ashi becoming a friend of his because Jack has made quite a few allies out of some of even his enemies before. But Ashi feels really forced because Jack kills her entire family. Like Jack kills all of her sisters, and Ashi is perfectly fine with falling in love with him, being his wife, and going back into the past with him and making a life with him. And I don't buy it. I feel like that's really fucking weird that this dude, even though he's not necessarily the bad guy anymore, he still killed all your sisters. And Ashi is supposed to be the one with the conscience. She's supposed to be the one who knows things, who understands things in a more morally righteous way than the others. And so I have a really big problem with her being in love with Jack after he killed her fucking family. Yes, they were misguided. Yes, they were, programmed to think like this. But still, it's kind of off for Jack and her to hook up because he fucking killed her entire family. So that's weird. And another big contrivance that annoys me is the fact that this season acts like Jack has never killed a human being. And this is kind of like asking if Batman's ever killed anybody, where in the Samurai Jack universe, organic beings tend to look like robots. And so you have scenes where Jack slices an elephant to pieces, but then you realize it's just a robot that happens to look like, a regular elephant. And the Samurai Jack world has a lot of that kind of stuff. But then there are very clear episodes where Jack does fucking kill people, like the episode with the bounty hunters, where these flesh and blood people are being murdered, and unlike any other instance of a robot getting slashed, you don't see circuits getting out, you don't see them exploding, and the implication is very clear. Jack is, killing people, but this season acts like Jack has never, ever killed anybody before he kills the daughters of Aku, and I don't buy that. There are instances where Jack is very clearly killing people, and the storyline is not just saying, oh, well, they were robots. Oh, well, then that doesn't matter. And then there are just some developments that feel really kind of half-assed and pointless. The Scotsman shows up in episode 4, I think, and he has this big army at his side, and he tries to kill Aku, and of course Aku just annihilates them all, and then he kills the Scotsman, and I'm like, oh shit, that's really ballsy. That's really whoa, because you just killed the Scotsman, who's a fan favorite, and so that's really ballsy. That shows you that okay, we're some serious shit is going to go down in the season, and then the Scotsman just comes back. because Celtic magic, and it is funny, but you did a really good job of showing us that you have the balls to kill a big fan favorite character like that, and then it just doesn't matter at the end because he just comes back in the final episode, and then that's that. And his inclusion also feels like one of those things that just wasn't planned out because the Scotsman makes it a point to say, okay, we fucked up because we didn't get Jack. So we're going to go find Jack, and Jack is going to help us kill Aku, and then we're going to help him. And nothing comes of that. Nothing. Like, there is no fucking indication that the Scotsman or his daughters actually go out there and try to find Samurai Jack. They literally set up something that looks like it's going to be like an ongoing subplot, and then they don't fucking do anything with it. He just disappears for the entire rest of the season, and then he shows up in a hasty reinforcements act in the final episode. And I'm like, was this supposed to go somewhere? Because it feels like it was, and then you just forgot about it. And a lot of the problems of the season are just the fact that Genny and the crew are not long-form storytellers. These guys, if you want to get a good episodic format show, or if you want to get a show that tells like a really simple story, these are the guys you want to get. But if you want to give them a story that's supposed to maybe like deal with some kind of maybe deeper subject matter, or in a longer form where it's supposed to be like one big cohesive narrative, I don't think these are the guys for you. And a lot of the like third act of the season feels kind of like padding, where we're just going through the motions, where we're going like through these like quasi standard McDefault Samurai Jack episodes that are supposed to like build to something, but they don't feel like they're building to something. And the structure of this thing is kind of a mess. And a lot of the final season just is that. It does feel like a big, massive mess. And another big contrivance is, what happens with Jack in like episode 5 or 6, where where like this village of like blue people gets taken over and their children are used as slaves. And then when they blow up the factory, Jack thinks they've all died. And then it turns out, if Jack just waited 5 extra minutes, he would have found out that they aren't dead. And kind of like the Scotsman thing, I'm like, okay, it feels like you were trying to be ballsy there for a second, but then you went chicken shit and just decided, no, Jack, he didn't wait. Like, Jack he overreacted, and then the blue people were fine. They weren't actually dead. And that's such a forced story development that annoys me, especially because they didn't need to do that, because in the episode that leads up to Ashi and Jack getting back together, Ashi meets several of Jack's allies, and she meets, the people who kind of look like elephants, and then she gets the rave people. She even encounters the Samurai. Even fucking Demongo shows up, which I was like, okay, how are you alive? Because Aku clearly murdered you, so what's up with that? But it's very weird because you already set up this thing where Ashi's meeting people who Jack has helped, and you could use them as an example for how to make Jack, restore Jack's will to live. Like that in spite of his failures, he has still done a lot of good for a lot of people, and he still has the capacity to do that good. And in a better planned story, you would have just had Jack, actually kill the kids, like have the kids actually die, and then use Jack's former successes to help him out in the present. But they don't do that. It's that really forced, almost borderline CW thing where if the character just waited 5 extra fucking minutes, this whole thing could have very easily have been avoided. And so this season just doesn't work. It's a mess. It's not an egregious mess as like you might think that I hate this season, but I actually don't. Like, I still think there are things that they do well. I do think that besides the ending, they do the theme, Jack, of trying to, get over his past. I think that majoritively works until the ending kind of fucks with it. Some of the fan service, did work. I did like Scaramouche. I think he's probably one of the best characters in the season. Like, there were lots of good fight scenes in it. And if there is one element I can definitively say that they set up well and they pay it off majoritively well, is Aku. And Aku is really interesting because when I found out that this was going to be the last season, I just thought that Aku was going to be like all bluster. He was going to be like, yeah, I fucked up the samurai. Like, let's go. This is going to be cool. But they don't do that. In fact, Aku becomes just as jaded and broken as Samurai Jack because after he destroys the time portals, Aku just thinks, okay, if I wait a couple of decades, Jack is going to get old, he's going to get weak, and then I can kill him then, or I can just wait for old age to do him in, and then he's going to be not my problem anymore. Then I can just get the sword, I can put it someplace safe where nobody can ever use it against me, and I'm going to win. And that's a really smart idea. That's a really cool way to get rid of your enemy. I don't think I've ever seen an antagonist who just says, fuck it, I'm just going to wait it out. I'm just going to wait for you to get old and decrepit, and then I'm just going to let you croak on your own, and then I'm going to kill you when you're too weak and frail to properly defend yourself anymore. And that's a really cool idea, and it really works as a way for Aku's character. But then Aku kind of fucks himself up where he realizes, oh shit, because I sent Jack into the future, Jack is effectively immortal. He never ages, or if he does, it happens very, very, very slowly. And so Aku is stuck in this kind of stalemate where Jack has lost the sword, so he can't kill Aku. But Aku doesn't know that Jack has lost the sword, and so he can't just go over there and kill him. And so Aku just thinks that he has this immortal samurai Jack constantly wandering the planet looking to kill him, and he's just buried himself inside his house. And once again, it does rely on that contrivance of why the fuck doesn't Aku know that Jack has lost his sword? He should know that. But it sets up such a cool, interesting character dynamic for Aku, where he's been at this so long, he's done all the evil shit you can possibly do, that he's just become like this jaded, beaten down old man who just kind of wants somebody to actually kill him, something to finally excite him anymore. And I think that most of the season does that really, really well. I don't think I've ever seen an example where both the main protagonist and the main antagonist are just as beaten up as one another. And I think that conceptually that works, but like I said, because of the sword contrivance, it just feels really forced that Aku just wouldn't know that Jack has lost his sword, and that he wouldn't just, go and kill him, because Jack factually cannot defend himself without the sword, or at least to set up some way for Jack to still protect himself from Aku to keep him at bay. So Aku does majoritively work throughout the entirety of the season, but all the rest of it feels kind of half-assed. It all feels really messy. Some of it feels entirely pointless. And the big fear that I had was entirely justified. So this isn't the worst final season I've ever seen, but I can really tell you that these guys are not the people you should have gotten for this kind of story. I feel like if you got Gendy back and let him animate stuff and let him focus on the visuals, and you got someone who's actually good at long-form storytelling to do that, I feel like this season would have been amazing. And there's a lot of conceptually really good things there, but ultimately it's kind of a mess. But despite that, I'm going to say once more, I appreciate the fact that Gendy Tartakovsky did definitively end the show. He ends it in a really mediocre, really messy way, but at least it is definitively over. It's not just a way to set up more seasons so it can go on and on and on forever and ever and ever, like fucking Star Wars and Dragon Ball. He ended it. He told the story he wanted to tell. He didn't do a particularly good job of it, in my opinion, but at least I can appreciate a creator knowing when enough is enough and ending his story and then going the fuck away to other stuff. So, yeah. Those are my thoughts on the final season of Samurai Jack. It's a mess. What did you guys think about it? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did the ending fuck with you? Did you like everything, the ending included? Please comment down below, and I'll hopefully see you next time. Bye.